Welcome to the program. If you're here, it's because you're looking for the full story, the facts that go beyond the headlines, to build real context.
And to understand the long-term consequences of these big pivotal events.
Today, we're doing a focused analysis of a very sensitive and frankly tragic subject. We're looking at the 2001 Sef Gonzales family murders in North Ryde, Australia. Our commitment, as always, is to a purely objective presentation of the facts. We're drawing from official records, the police investigation, judicial outcomes, and the really significant legal fallout that came after.
That's a really crucial point. When we examine the material on this case, it's so much more than just a crime timeline.
Right.
Our task is to move beyond the initial shock and really understand the full scope. You know, the intense family expectations, the methodical nature of the crime itself, and maybe most unexpectedly, the huge societal and legal consequences that ended up changing Australian real estate law forever.
The source material we have is pretty exhaustive. It's an extensive entry that details Gonzales' life, the crimes, the police work, the trials, the appeals.
And of course, the controversy around the sale of the family home afterward.
It's a dense collection of facts, and our job here is to help you navigate all of that information.
And this material, it immediately highlights the central paradox of the whole case.
How so?
Well, you have this family that was built on resilience, professional success, a classic striving immigrant family who had survived this incredible hardship.
Only to be completely destroyed from within by their own son.
Exactly. And that path, from a private family tragedy to a public case that creates landmark changes in consumer protection law, that's precisely why this case is still so significant in Australian history.
Okay, let's unpack that history. We should probably start with the foundation of the family itself.
Right. So the Gonzales family, they came from Baguio, Benguet, in the Philippines.
And the parents, Teodoro or Teddy and Mary Loeva Gonzales, they were professionals. Teddy was a lawyer.
He was, and a highly capable one. They'd built a life that seemed, destined for success, but it was a stability they had to fight for.
The sources really emphasize their incredible resilience. There was this pivotal event that shaped their whole future, the 1990 Luzon earthquake.
And this wasn't just a minor setback. I mean, the quake completely destroyed their home and their business. They had a newly built 40-room hotel just gone.
Wow.
The story even goes that Teddy Gonzales had to physically pull a young Sef from the rubble of that disaster.
That detail alone is so powerful. It just shows the depth of their commitment and the extremity of the hardship they'd already overcome.
It does. So their emigration to Sydney in the 1990s, that wasn't just a move for convenience. It was a desperate act of reestablishment, driven by catastrophe. They were seeking safety and a fresh start.
And they found it with a remarkable speed.
They really did. Teddy requalified as an immigration lawyer in Australia, set up a successful firm in North Ryde. They built a comfortable, stable life for their two children, Sef, born in 1980, and his younger sister, Clodine, born in 83.
But the sources are very clear on this next point. While the family presented this close-knit, devout Catholic front to the world, there were extremely high, very strict expectations placed on the children, especially on Sef.
Yes, and this created a high-pressure environment that is absolutely crucial to understanding what happened next.
The parents specifically wanted him to give up his musical aspirations.
Yeah.
They saw things like singing as distractions.
Complete distractions. They wanted him to pursue a serious career, medicine or law. That was the path they had laid out.
And he tried to follow it at first.
He did. He attended Parramatta Marist High School, then enrolled in medical science at the University of New South Wales. But he withdrew after just 2 years.
So then he tried law at Macquarie University, trying to meet those expectations.
But the reality didn't match the performance he was projecting. He was doing very poorly, was constantly at risk of being expelled, and critically, he began to systematically falsify his grades to hide this failure from his parents.
That pattern of sustained deception, that seems to be the silent fracture point in the family.
And the person who brought it all crashing down, unfortunately, was his younger sister, Clodine.
She found out and told their parents.
She did. And once the truth was out, the parents reacted severely, confirming all of Sef's worst fears. They threatened to withdraw his privileges.
Including the use of his prized car, a green Ford Festiva.
Which might sound like a small thing, but we have to understand the context.
Right. The car wasn't just transportation, was it?
Not at all. The sources indicate it was this potent symbol of the life his successful parents had given him, the life he was expected to maintain. Losing it meant public humiliation, the end of his social independence, and the total exposure of his lies.
And that threat to his status was compounded by other conflicts.
Yes, a big one was a girlfriend his mother highly disapproved of. It all escalated to the point where they were threatening to disinherit him entirely.
So when we look at the motive, the one that police and prosecutors meticulously laid out later, it's this incredibly volatile mix.
It is. It's the financial inheritance, on the one hand. We're talking an estimated 1.5 million Australian dollars, plus another 1.3 million pesos in the Philippines.
But it was also desperate retaliation. Retaliation against that strict parenting and the immediate looming loss of his entire status.
And that combination is what elevates this from a domestic dispute to an act of calculated malice. It wasn't just about getting the money someday. It was about avoiding the collapse of the facade he'd built and securing the lifestyle that facade protected.
Which brings us to the specific timeline of violence. That chilling calculation is on full display when we look at the crimes committed on July 10th, 2001. And we should approach this timeline with solemnity, remembering the tragic loss of Teddy, Loiva, and Clodine Gonzales.
The judicial records provide an incredibly precise and frankly disturbing timeline. It spans several hours and really demonstrates the cold-blooded planning involved.
It starts in the afternoon.
At approximately 4 p.m., Gonzales left the family law firm where he worked part-time. He went straight to the family house at 6 Collins Street in North Ryde.
And the first attack was around 4:30 p.m.
Yes. On his younger sister, Clodine. She was just 18 years old, studying in her bedroom.
He came armed.
He used a baseball bat from his car and 2 kitchen knives that he took from a knife block inside the house.
The violence inflicted on her was... it was prolonged.
Extremely prolonged and multifaceted. The records detail attempts to strangle her, compression of the neck, severe blunt force head injuries from the bat, and then multiple stab wounds. This was not a quick act. It was a targeted, brutal assault.
And after this horrific act, he didn't run.
He waited. He knew his parents would be home at different times. He waited for about an hour for his mother, Loiva, to arrive.
She got home around 5:30 p.m.
She did. The attack on her happened in the living or dining room area. The description of her injuries in the reports is it's extensive. Multiple stab wounds and cuts to her face, neck, chest, and abdomen.
The level of fury was just extreme.
It was. One detail that's particularly jarring is the notation of a post-mortem transaction of her windpipe.
It's just chilling to think that a double homicide had occurred in that house, and the crime was nearly interrupted.
It's an incredible detail. Around 6 p.m., Gonzales' maternal aunt visited the house.
What happened?
She noted that both Sef's and Loiva's cars were in the driveway, which meant people should be home, but the house was dark and it was unusually quiet.
Quiet was a red flag.
A huge one. The family owned 6 small dogs, who would normally be barking if anyone came to the door.
So she knew something was off.
She looked into the house. She saw some movement, which might have been Sef hiding. And for reasons that were never really established, she decided not to go inside through the garage as she normally would have. She and her son just left.
If she'd gone inside, the entire course of events would have been different.
Drastically. The final victim, the father, Teddy Gonzales, arrived home around 6:50 p.m.
And he fought back.
He did. The presence of defensive wounds confirms he fought for his life against his own son. Gonzales attacked him with one of the knives, inflicting multiple stab wounds to his neck, chest, back, and abdomen.
The fatal injuries were severe.
Penetration of his right lung and heart, and one particularly violent stab wound that partially severed his spinal cord.
So this horrific violence spanned over 2 hours. And once it was over, the next phase of his plan began.
The meticulous staging.
He disposed of the weapons, his bloody clothes, the size 7 running shoes he was wearing. He showered, changed, and then executed his plan of misdirection.
The misdirection being the spray paint.
Right. He spray painted the words, "Fuck off Asians," on a wall in the house.
The intent there was crystal clear, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Construct a narrative of a hate crime, divert all suspicion away from the one surviving immediate family member. It shows not just violence, but intellectual malice and manipulation.
So with the scene staged, he moved on to solidifying his alibi.
At 8 p.m., he drove to a friend's house. They went to the Sydney CBD, went to Planet Hollywood for a meal, and then a video game arcade.
That casualness, engaging in normal, youthful activities just hours after committing a triple murder. It speaks volumes about the profound emotional detachment that investigators would later focus on.
He dropped his friend off, went home, And only then, at 11:48 p.m., did he call emergency services.
Claiming to have just discovered the bodies. He then ran frantically to his neighbors, falsely claiming his parents had been shot, trying to manufacture this believable state of distress.
Which leads us right into the investigation. And what immediately complicated things for the police was his performance.
Right, both the staged scene and his behavior. But his own actions gave him away almost immediately.
The NSW police, they initially bought the hate crime angle, or at least considered it.
They did, faced with the graffiti.
Yeah.
But that theory just it disintegrated very quickly under scrutiny.
What was the first thing that didn't add up?
The duration. A key point. Thieves or hate criminals do not linger for 3 hours in a residential area. It's unheard of.
And there were no signs of forced entry.
None. And nothing valuable was missing. There was even cash on the victims. The crime scene just did not align with the story he was trying to sell.
And then you have Sef's very public deception. The sources mention his television appearance.
Yes, appearing seemingly distraught, asking for the killers to come forward, even offering a $100,000 reward.
But this image of the grieving son contrasted so sharply with his private actions.
Which screamed motive. The financial urgency he displayed was probably the single biggest red flag for investigators.
We're talking within days of the murders.
Not weeks, days. He was at the family accountant's office asking how to access his $1.5 million inheritance. He'd already moved into a new apartment in Chatswood.
And he wasn't just waiting for the money, he was already spending it.
Exactly. He put a large deposit on a $173,000 Lexus, telling the dealership he'd use the inheritance money to pay the rest.
The speed of it all is just remarkable. It shows the motive wasn't just about getting rich someday.
No, it was about leveraging his parents' deaths immediately to get the lifestyle he felt entitled to. The trial later revealed he traded in his parents' cars and even pawned his mother's jewelry shortly after the funerals.
And he was pursuing the victim of crime payout as well.
For $15,000, yes.
The psychological disconnect just kept fueling suspicion. The detail about the funeral, on July 20th, is one that investigators really focused on.
At the combined service, he delivered the eulogy and then sang One Sweet Day by Mariah Carey and Boys the Second Men.
Which many people there found odd.
Bizarre and emotionally jarring. Singing a pop song rather than offering a quiet, traditional memorial, it just emphasized his profound emotional distance from the tragedy.
And police noted that, his lack of conventional grief, all the inconsistencies in his stories.
Like his claim of performing CPR on his family, which the medical evidence completely contradicted.
And his deceptions weren't just for the police or the public. He was spinning lies to relatives, trying to get more money.
Yes, he falsely claimed to have a brain tumor and asked his godmother in the Philippines for $190,000 for surgery.
She refused.
Thankfully, yes. But all these actions together, the immediate focus on money, the public performance, the desperate fabrications, they painted a picture of a man focused entirely on self-preservation and financial gain, not on grief.
So let's move into how the police started building their case.
Yeah.
How they used forensics and surveillance to just dismantle this web of lies he'd created.
What's really fascinating about the investigation by Strikeforce Tawaz is how quickly they connected these small forensic details to confirm their suspicions.
For example,
the sources note that paint residue found on Gonzales' clothing matched the paint used for the Fuck Off Asians graffiti,
a direct link to him staging the scene.
directly implicating him. And then there was the shoe evidence.
Ah, the shoebox.
Exactly. Investigators found a shoebox in his room that corresponded precisely to the size 7 running shoes used during the attacks, which he'd tried to get rid of.
So these early forensic links solidified their focus on him.
Absolutely. It prompted them to intensify their surveillance. They started recording his phone calls. They deployed an undercover policeman to monitor him.
And the surveillance is what allowed them to just methodically tear his alibis apart.
Yes, the sources detailed 2 sequential alibis, each one more desperate than the last.
What was the first one?
Alibi 1 was pretty simple. He claimed he just waited in his car near his home before driving to another suburb to meet his friend.
And the police disproved that.
Thoroughly. By December 2001, they had disproved it, likely through cell phone pings or traffic camera records.
So, faced with that, he constructed a second, much more elaborate alibi.
A truly desperate gambit. He claimed he took a taxi to a brothel during the exact time of the murders. The reason for the taxi, he said, was so his own car wouldn't be recognized near the scene.
But that fell apart immediately.
Miserably. The prosecution brought forward testimony from both the supposed taxi driver and the sex worker he claimed to have been with.
And they both discredited his story.
Completely. confirmed he had fabricated his location and actions entirely. This revealed a man not just lying, but pathologically inventing complex scenarios to cover his tracks.
He even tried to create other false trails, didn't he?
He did. Police uncovered a fabricated email that tried to implicate a business rival of his father's, and then on May 30th, 2002, he staged an attempted burglary at his own residence, trying to keep up the idea that he was under threat from these fictional attackers.
But the critical turning point, the breakthrough that cemented premeditation and led to his arrest, it wasn't related to the crime scene at all.
No, it came from a bizarre prior threat. You're talking about the product contamination letters.
Exactly.
Gonzales' fingerprint was matched to a series of letters threatening product poisoning. And this was linked directly to address searches they found on his personal computer.
And this forensic match didn't just solve a contamination threat.
It blew the timeline of his planning wide open.
This is where the depth of his intent becomes truly sickening.
The investigation uncovered this extensive evidence of him researching poisons, ordering toxic plant seeds, and most damningly, records of recent unexplained poisoning-like illnesses within his own family in the months leading up to the murders.
So the murders on July 10th? They weren't crimes of sudden passion.
Not at all. They were the culmination of months of calculated, cold-blooded preparation. He had initially planned to murder his entire family with poison, a method that would have been much harder to trace back to him.
And when that failed or was too slow, he escalated.
He escalated to immediate, brutal violence. And this sustained malice aforethought was absolutely instrumental in the severity of the charges brought against him.
So based on this overwhelming body of evidence, forensic, financial, behavioral Gonzales was arrested by detectives from Strikeforce Tolwas on June 13, 2002.
Which brings us to the formal judicial process, the legal verdict, and the many, many appeals that followed.
So after the arrest, he's charged with 3 counts of murder.
And that one count of threatening product contamination, he was immediately refused bail.
And there's a real irony in the fact that he was denied access to the family estate to fund his defense.
The very assets he killed to acquire. He was forced to rely on legal aid for the trial.
The trial took place across April and May of 2004. Mark Tedeschi prosecuted.
And he presented this comprehensive narrative of calculated ambition fueled by serial deception. The prosecution's case relied heavily on showing the jury Gonzales' countless lies to friends, family, and the police, painting him as a pathological liar.
The court heard all the evidence confirming that dual motive.
Yes, avoiding the humiliation of losing his privileges and securing the family property. The evidence of months of planning, starting with the poison research, that allowed the court to confirm the highest degree of malice aforethought.
The jury found him guilty on all 4 charges on May 20, 2004. Sentencing was on September 17th.
And the sentence reflected the severity of the crime. 3 concurrent life sentences without parole.
The judge, Justice Bruce James, made some remarks during sentencing that are still cited today.
They are. He used a very specific legal phrase, saying the murders showed features of very great heinousness and fell within the worst category of cases of murder at common law.
For listeners who aren't familiar with Australian law, what does that worst category designation actually mean?
That language is reserved for cases that show extreme depravity and premeditation. It signifies that the crime was systematic, involved multiple victims, was carried out with calculated cruelty, and showed a total absence of mercy.
So it means the judge believes the offender should never be released.
Never, under any circumstances. It's a definitive judicial stamp on the cold-blooded nature of what he did.
Despite the finality of that sentence, Gonzales has pursued numerous appeals over the years.
It's standard in cases like this, but his appeal history is extensive. In June 2007, he was granted approval to appeal, arguing that statements he made to police on the night of the murders should be inadmissible because he hadn't been formally cautioned.
How did that go?
It was dismissed decisively in November 2007. The court found no miscarriage of justice, ruling that even without those initial statements, the forensic evidence was just so overwhelming.
The staged scene, the financial actions, the failed alibis, the poisoning research.
Exactly. It was more than enough to confirm the conviction.
And he kept trying after that. Failed attempts for a special inquiry in 2018, 2019, and again in March 2021.
Which brings us to a very recent development detailed in the source material, the August 2025 update.
Right. Decades after the trial, Gonzales won the right to appeal again.
And this time, it's based on a new psychological dimension, the discovery of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
What's so fascinating about that is the context. This is a disorder he had previously refused to even be evaluated for during the original trial.
Precisely. He spent years focusing on technical legal errors, and now, decades later, he's shifting his focus to his own psychological state at the time of the crime.
This late introduction of psychological factors, especially when he himself rejected them before, it adds this profound complexity to the legal concept of finality, doesn't it?
It really does. It raises the question of whether new medical understanding can retroactively alter a judicial assessment of intent, even when so much time has passed.
So now we shift from the judicial process to the long-term impact on the community and, really surprisingly, on Australian property law.
Right. This is where the immediate horror of the crime transitioned into a critical piece of legal precedent.
The house itself became a huge point of contention.
The property at 6 Collins Street, North Ryde, which the family had built just a year before the murders, it immediately got the grim moniker of the murder house.
And because of that notoriety, it just sat on the market.
Completely unsold for 3 agonizing years.
That economic stagnation is powerful proof of its reputation, but the controversy really ignited when they finally tried to sell it.
Absolutely. In October 2004, a couple from Taiwan agreed to purchase the property. The issue was that the realtors, L.J. Hooker, failed to inform them of the triple murder that had occurred there.
And they only found out after reading about the case in a newspaper.
Yes. And this led to an immediate crisis for the realty company. Their initial legal position was a traditional one, rooted in the old principle of caveat emptor.
Let the buyer beware.
Exactly. Before this case, that was the prevailing standard for psychological defects. Realtors could legally argue they had no duty to disclose a non-physical defect like a murder, even if it clearly scared off buyers and lowered the home's value. The burden was on the buyer to do their research.
But the public outrage was just immense.
It was. The media storm forced their hand. While L.J. Hooker initially maintained they had no legal obligation, they quickly refunded the buyer's $80,000 deposit to deal with the bad publicity.
And they faced formal sanctions.
Yes, the NSW Office of Fair Trading fined them $21,000 for failing to disclose material facts.
And that incident was the final catalyst for legal change.
It was. The source material confirms this case directly prompted the NSW government to step in and enact a new consumer protection law.
What did the new law do?
It made it explicitly illegal to fail to disclose information that could have a substantial impact on the value of a property. This was revolutionary. It directly overturned the realtor's ability to hide what are called stigmatized properties.
So the Sef Gonzales case basically established that the history of a heinous crime is a psychological impairment that must be disclosed.
Precisely. And the final sale price of the house quantifies the exact financial impact of that impairment.
It finally sold in November 2005.
4 years after the murders for $720,000. And crucially, that was $80,000 less than what the previous buyers had agreed to pay before they found out the history. This new buyer was fully informed.
That $80,000 difference is the undeniable proof the legislature needed.
It is. It quantified the substantial impact of non-disclosure and showed that a tragedy like this does, in fact, diminish the objective market value, making the new disclosure law justifiable consumer protection.
It's an incredible conclusion. The ambition and deception of one man not only destroyed his family, but also forced this necessary evolution in Australian property law.
A truly powerful, if tragic, legacy.
So we've walked through the tragic contrast between the Gonzales family's ambition and Sef's profound deception. We've traced the extensive, chilling detail of the planned crime.
And established the direct link between this terrible event and the new consumer protection legislation in New South Wales regarding property history.
This comprehensive review of the material really leaves one final thought for you to reflect on.
Considering that 2025 update, the appeal based on PTSD, a disorder Sef Gonzales previously refused to acknowledge, you should consider the long-term ethical and judicial implications. How do psychological factors, introduced decades after the fact, challenge our concept of finality and justice? And what does that mean for incarceration when a defendant's own prior stance is used as part of a modern appeal strategy?
Thank you for joining us for this rigorous discussion of the source material.
We hope this analysis has been thorough and insightful.
Thanks for listening.